just clicked Showtime. Fuck it.
Yeah. So now we're going to do the part where there's nothing going on for like 3 minutes while I wait for the stream to boot on my browser.
Okay. Steve, what are we drinking today? Anything good?
Water.
Boring.
It's pretty boring.
How good is the water?
I think you should make
I
a
see
gimmick.
it.
You should make a gimmick out of having a different alcoholic beverage every week. Someone already brought it up in the chat too. They think you're drinking wine.
You could drink the cat. Right. Hello and welcome everyone to Gamestate episode 24. It is Wednesday, January the 16th, because scheduling is a tough boss. And today we're going to be talking about GP Singapore, GP Atlantic City, and Star City San Diego. I am your host, Adam, a winner is you, Ragsdale, and with me as always are Glenn Jones, event coverage coordinator for Star City Games.
Today I will once again be a motionless statue.
Stephen Flavel, poker pro and magic enthusiast.
Everybody.
And Cedric Phillips, professional wizard.
Hello, my friends. Hope everyone's having a fantastic day.
The first thing we're going to talk about today is GP Singapore, which was a limited GP. It was won by Ken Yukihiro, defeating the mighty Pack Rat in the finals. And we're going to talk about just sort of a general retrospective on the Return to Ravnica limited format as we move towards Gatecrash, which is coming out in about a week and a half at the pre-release. So we are going to take a look back at the Return to Ravnica format and talk about what we did like and what we didn't like. So first, I am going to go to Cedric. How did you feel about Return to Ravnica Limited?
So, when you attach Ravnica to a set, it brings back old memories of what I believe to be probably the best limited format of all time. At least you can make the argument of it. I think it's in high regard for everybody out there. So, clearly I, was hoping it would be just as good as that, and it's probably not fair to have it put up on that lofty scale, because I don't think that Return to Ravnica was as good as that format, but then again, nothing may ever be that good again. So, I thought the format was fine. I think my issue with the format is that you were pigeonholed into 5 different decks, obviously, the guilds that are being present and their mechanics, and then besides that, you really couldn't branch out too much. I remember that for our Pro Tour testing for Return to Ravnica, we tried drafting Boros, and we tried drafting all of these, off-color guild decks and seeing if you could take advantage of, crossing over mechanics, and maybe people wouldn't notice that you could do that, and force the Ether Armor deck across white-black to go along with those stab wounds and stuff like that, and it turns out you just, can't do that. So then you are just, pigeonholed into drafting the 5 guilds, and, if it's overdrafted, your deck kind of sucks because it can't support 2 players, and I think with that being, the issue, the format just got kind of stale fast, really. And as you play more of the format, obviously some of the problems become readily apparent. Pack Rat being one of them, obviously. And I think the format was okay in general. It was really fun at the beginning, but I think that this is one limited format that got stale really fast. Where I remember drafting Innistrad quite a bit and it almost never feeling stale, and I kind of felt the same way about M13 too. So I'm really excited for the next format to come out, Gatecrash. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun. Just 5 new mechanics. Wash yourself of what we just did for the previous couple of months. Not have to worry about any more pack rats either. So I'm looking forward to the change.
All right, Glenn, how do you feel about Return to Ravnica Limited?
I can echo Cedric's feelings, especially on winding up a little disappointed with the comparison to RGD. But I think that part of that is that this set actually compares much more to Shards of Alara or even Onslaught Block, I think, where there are just some very clear strategies that the cards are designed to work with. There aren't cards that are great in different decks. Most of the cards you're just supposed to be in that deck playing with those cards, and when you try and mix them up, you're going to get a less great card most of the time. So from that aspect, I find those kind of formats pretty enjoyable. You get to hone and tweak and figure out exactly what your pick order should be and how to build the best version of each deck. It took forever for people to catch on to Golgari, for example, and that was an interesting aspect of the format for me, because there were cards that you legitimately had to figure out if they were even playable in that strategy, because there were so many playable ones, but you kind of needed a cohesive whole to make the deck actually work. So in that regard, I liked it. I think that the mechanics the keywords did a lot of work for that because you got a lot of flavor out of the keywords in this set, and that's how all the decks worked. But I don't really get that feeling from Gatecrash just yet. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, and you'll draft like Conspire decks all the time or something, but that doesn't seem very likely. Evolve obviously like has that going for it, but a mechanic like Extort, I don't see that being like a draft archetype like the Extort deck. It's just like a value add on some spells.
Alrighty. Steven, how did you feel about Return to Ravnica Limited?
My biggest disappointment, and this is like a very, very, very large disappointment, is they announced Return to Ravnica, and obviously they're doing the shop plans, obviously. And obviously they're doing the bounce lands, right? Because the bounce lands are 100% what made Ravnica draft like what it was. And I will stand by that opinion forever. They're 2-color lands which give you card advantage and make it so you can get to 4 or 5. It's like the eternal problem in limited formats is it's interesting to cast cards which cost 4 or 5, but you can't do it consistently because you can't set your deck up very well to consistently draw the mana and survive that long, etc. But the bounce lands just made it so everyone could do that. It made it so you could play all the colors. And then they didn't print the bounce lands. And I feel like Return to Ravnica was just Ravnica block what it would have been like without the bounce lands. That's my opinion. I think the bounce lands were really, really important to the feel of that set. So, in conclusion, like, I hate Pursuit of Flight and don't want to play against that card ever again.
All right, that's fair. Do you think that had a significant impact on Sealed as well? Because I think the bounce lands were like possibly even more important in Sealed.
Well, I remember when I was doing Sealed, and I used to play like crazy back then. Like, because that was my sophomore year of college, and I was just drafting every moment that I wasn't in class. I was drafting. It was just psychotic because the format was so good. And I remember just going to all the sealed PTQs and the sealed GPs, and I went for that. And that was the first thing I looked for. So I looked for if I had Cygnus, if I had Bounce Lands, and if I had Civic Wayfinder. And then just kind of went from there. So yeah, I think that the Bounce Lands were a huge deal. Where it's like, it's like kind of nice to have the gates or whatever. They're fine, but they just don't really compare to Bounce Lands. But it's kind of an interesting topic on if the Bounce Lands were too powerful for limited. And I don't think they were. Maybe they were like on the edge of being like too powerful, especially because they were common. But I don't know. They really. I didn't even think about it that way, Steven. They really did define that format, and I think that's part of what made that format great.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say they would have had an impact on Constructed as well, because they saw significant play in Constructed decks as well. So that is one possible aspect. But yeah, it's an interesting take on the limited format. Thank you for that. So let's, unless anyone has anything further about Return to Ravnica Limited, I don't want to go super deep. We can just let it slip away. But let us move on.
And it's done.
Yeah, that's the cutoff. We'll never be back. Let's move on to GP Atlantic City, which was a standard Grand Prix won by John Stern with Bant Auras, which I will generally refer to as standard Slippery Boggle. In a top 8 of 2 Bant Auras, 2 Jund, 1 Peddler, 1 Mono Red, 1 Esper, and 1 Blue-White Red. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, of course, the mighty Bant Auras, Pants Monster, Slippery Boggle, whatever you want to call that concoction. There were 2 of them in the top 8. They met in the finals. My understanding is that it was not a heavily played deck on the weekend, but did very, very well. How do you guys feel about Bant Auras? Cedric, you can start us off.
I hate it. I hate it. So there's one thing. Okay, so there's a couple things about this deck. Number one, from a coverage aspect, it's fantastic because the standard format to me was starting to get a little bit stale about with what people could do in the format. And we just started seeing a bunch of good card decks come into play, and you can even kind of find that here. So for me, like someone who does coverage for a living, SEG Live next weekend in Dallas, or this coming weekend in Dallas, is going to be exciting because now we have a new deck. So when it comes to the feature match area, I'm not going to be like, oh yeah, it's Thragtusk versus Thragtusk again. So from that aspect of it, I'm pretty happy. There has been a lot of talk about this deck in the past 3 days. Like more so than I've seen in a long time. Just about a deck and how it affects Magic, and it's all over Twitter, and we'll talk about probably glaring spotlight at some point. But this deck is clearly it's clearly good. It won the tournament. Like it was a heads up match in the finals, and some very big name players are playing and had success with it. So it's clearly a good deck. And this is the kind of deck that, if no one knows that it exists, this is the kind of deck that can take a tournament by surprise. And whenever I think of taking a tournament by surprise, I really think of Grand Prix Charlotte like 6 years ago when Frigorite hit the scene. And, I was in that tournament and knew the deck existed. And, there was like 20% of the room that knew and 80% that didn't. And when you walk in that tournament, your opponent's like, oh, what's going on? And then you're just like, I'm gonna dredge, and they're just like, wait, what's going on? And now you're dead. Like, I feel like that's kind of what was going on with this deck, where like the person would play. Can you imagine Josh Under-Layton sitting across from you and going, "Invisible Stalker, it's your turn," and you're just going, "Oh God, you would never you would never do this unless you're just trying to like humiliate someone or destroy them with like the hexproof mechanics." So I think that this deck took the tournament by storm in a big way. I don't know how good it is moving forward, obviously, because it might be like your kind of one-trick pony deck. Can it stand up to the hate? How much hate does it take to be able to beat this kind of deck? Who knows? But obviously, for last week in Atlantic City, it was a fantastic choice. And congratulations to John Stern and Josh Layton for making the finals with it. You can have arguments all day about how healthy or unhealthy this deck doing well is, and I'm sure at some point we'll talk about that. But I will let the next person go on for now.
All right, Glenn. Pants and the people who wear them. How do you feel about them?
I think it was a really nice weekend for the deck. It sort of exploited a very small hole in a really ideal time for the metagame. People just really weren't prepared to acknowledge Geist of St. Traft as a real thing, especially backed by Pants, Silverblade Paladin. We've obviously talked about that interaction on the show a few times already. So it just wound up being sort of a perfect storm and crushing the tournament very easily. I know personally, like, if people are playing Mono Red, I love just casting Geist of St. Traft against them. This is not as good as it has been in the past, but, like, just the comparison of Geist of St. Traft to the cards that they're playing is a joke most of the time. Like, he's just a better burn spell than all of the cards in their deck by so much.
Why is no one, like, paired up the two great tastes that were meant to taste great together, Geist of St. Traft and Fireheart Wolf? Like, why haven't we seen that going on? Alright, Steven. Bant auras. How do you feel?
I think it's a great deck, and people who don't like this deck are dumb. And
Right.
the reason I think that is, like, to play exciting Magic, to have an exciting Magic format and watch exciting Magic games be played, you need decks which make people do things on turn 3 or turn 4, or like perhaps even something on turn 2 or 1. It's a possibility. And Rakdos has been a fine deck, and it's like done a little bit to force the format that way, but it's sort of fizzled out. It hasn't quite managed to stay. And so, like, bringing you on in, because I don't know, you just need something that makes someone play a Wrath of God on turn 3 at least, and then probably still die in the Magic format, so that people have to play 2-drops. That's my opinion, and this does it. It's unfortunate that it does it in a sort of non-interactive way, which I think is going to be a lot of people's complaint about the deck. But firstly, I think that it should, and secondly, I don't think that it is non-interactive at all. So I like the deck a lot. It's a great deck for the tournament, and I think it's a great deck for the format.
Alright. I'm willing to let it go. I think we'll probably return to the hexproof scene a little bit later in the show, but I'm willing to step away from that deck for the moment. Let's talk Nightshade Peddler for a little bit. Brad Nelson did very well with a take on the Nightshade Peddler deck that included the full 4 Olivias and 4 Izzet Static Casters. I will link the mini deck tech in the chat, but the Peddler deck has been floating around for a while now and seeing a fair bit of play. How do you guys feel about this approach to peddling and peddling in general? Cedric, get going.
Keep going, I shall. This is a deck that Brad has been testing a lot on his stream, so if you do pay attention to his stream, you know that this thing existed, and if you didn't, then you probably didn't. And furthermore, you probably didn't take it incredibly seriously. This seems like the kind of evolution to the Jund mid-range decks that we've seen over the course of this format, and this is basically a Jund mid-range deck with a hyper combo finish. And Peddler plus, the various ways to make Peddler good with Huntmaster, Olivia, and is it Static Caster? And it seems like a decent place to be, honestly. It seems like it's pretty consistent. But the thing about this deck, and you can make this argument with any deck in Standard, honestly, it's just all about matchups. And, if you get paired against, a deck like Naya midrange, you are going to be crushing up the tournament. And you can kind of adjust your deck to beat a decent wide range of decks. There are some decks, of course, that are just pretty weak to Peddler plus Static Caster, or Peddler plus any of the guys that get to shoot stuff. So I feel like it depends on what your matchups were for the day, because if you get against a Hexproof deck, yeah, not winning ever. So, I think the deck is fine. I don't think it's. I think it's like a perfectly reasonable deck to play. I don't think it's anything earth-shattering. As you said, we've seen this deck multiple weeks now. Different takes of it. We've seen graveyard versions of it. We've seen fair versions of it. I think we've seen like 5-color versions of it. I think we even saw the combo in Legacy, one day when we were doing the Legacy grab bag. So I think everyone's pretty aware that this thing exists, and I think it probably gets better with the next set just because of mana. Maybe there's some cards that we're not really thinking about that probably, help this deck out quite a bit. But what's going on here is pretty straightforward. Can't imagine that it took too many people by surprise about what he was trying to accomplish, but that also just means that what he is trying to accomplish with this deck, Brad, it looks to be pretty effective where it's supposed to be. So, not a bad deck, and obviously a good finish.
All right. Glenn, thoughts on peddling?
Yeah, this deck is a reasonable one. It does have a lot of the strengths of Jund. It's a little fragile in some spots. Its mono-red matchup being like notoriously obnoxiously bad, especially in game 1. Games 2 and 3, you can definitely do some stuff, but the pressure is still on you to actually muster the correct cards. So I find it kind of interesting because it's a deck that's much better live than on MTGO, I think, where mono-red is so much more present. So its success is kind of hard to predict on a given weekend if you're using Moto to actually track what you think is going on in a format, which I think made that a pretty good reason to play it just this weekend. I would not be expecting a lot of mono red going into Grand Prix Atlantic City, a GP in the Northeast. A lot of good players who you can assume won't play mono red, although obviously we've got some out there who are outliers, such as Ari Lax and especially not Cedric Phillips.
Yeah.
But but I think that makes it a much more reasonable call. Obviously, for Brad, it sort of worked out / sort of didn't, I suppose, since he wound up getting killed in top 4. But, it's a reasonable deck, and I think I would have rather been playing that deck than a normal Jund deck. So if you want to cast Rakdos' returns, that's a fine place to be doing it.
All right. Steven, would you like to peddle us some insight?
I don't know. I don't have much that's fresh to say about this deck. I think that it's still an interesting coordination between like a deck which responds to the early game decks of the format and has something extremely powerful to top it off with. But I think Cedric said that as well as I could. And other than that, I think that one of the key things in putting this deck like from mediocre to okay into the good category is its Static Caster being a good card just to cast on its own, which it is if everyone's playing Absence Pilgrim, Snapcaster Mage, and Lingering Souls, and I don't think they are right now, and it's pretty bad if everyone's playing Invisible Stalker. So I'm not like super excited about this deck right now.
Right. Fair enough. Right. Let's move on. We're going at a record-breaking pace. Let's move on to Star City Games San Diego. The Standard Open was won by Joe Lawsett, a familiar face around the Star City Open top 8s with Human Reanimator, reminiscent of the deck that won the GP Nagoya Past about a month ago. In a top 8 of 1 Human Reanimator, 1 4-color mid-range, 1 green-red aggro, 1 black-red aggro, 1 Naya, 1 4-color Peddler, 1 blue-white Geist, and 1 Esper Control, which is 8 unique deck archetypes for those of you keeping track. So instead of going into the specific decks, we talked about a few decks specifically from Atlantic City. let's just take a general look back at this standard format, sort of similar to how we did with the limited format. How did you guys feel about standard with Innistrad and Return to Ravnica? And yeah, what were your most favorite and least favorite things about it? Cedric, drop the knowledge.
I mean, as someone who has covered this format for coverage and played in at least one standard Grand Prix in San Antonio, I think only one, maybe two. I can't remember now. I play so much damn Magic. I think it was a success. I think overall people are really happy with this format. At the end of the day, that's all that matters. It doesn't matter if I hate it. It doesn't matter if anybody here hates it. I think overall it was a success. Attendance was high. Decks were always changing. There was a lot of tweaking to be done. There wasn't one deck that was so much better than everything else. At the beginning of the format, it was how is everyone going to be Thragtusk? And then it's like, why the hell would you be casting Thragtusk? What's wrong with you? So, I think it was a good format. We did the little do-si-do, the little merry-go-round, and you even see, in Atlantic City, a deck that, it's interesting to me, a little tangent, that, we had this hexproof deck come back now, like, out of the blue, when, like, this is basically, like, what was, like, kind of the format-defining deck of Pro Tour Barcelona, was, like, Star City Games Black came up with, like, this hexproof deck, like, the night before, and then just, like, Dennis made the finals of the tournament, and it's just like, man, that deck's so good. And then just like the new format comes in, and it's just like you don't hear a word about it. And then at the back end of this standard format, it's just like, yeah, dude, play hexproof, you lose. So like that's kind of weird to me because normally the decks just transition over. But that's also what's kind of makes standard kind of interesting because we have all of these decks that you can just play, and you can play mono red and get lucky for a weekend, or get unlucky like I did. You can pedal to the metal. You can play different forms of peddler decks. You can play all these different forms of control decks. You can be a maniac like Andrew Shrout and play a deck where Borderland Ranger doesn't fix your mana. Like you
play more than one deck at once. Like you can just
yeah. There's just so much you can do in this format, and I think like. Me personally, I didn't get a ton of enjoyment out of it because like that kind of frustrates me because I'm the kind of player who likes to just pick a deck and just go to town with it for the entire format, and like you couldn't really do that here. So for me, I'm frustrated. But like overall, for like the health of the game or whatever, it's got to be fantastic that you can play this many decks. For God's sake, 5th place green red aggro and stomping grounds not legal was a deck this weekend.
Won't need.
And when I found out that Mark Lalagou and Andre were playing this deck, I was like, what? Have you guys lost your fucking mind? And they're just like, no, man, it's pretty good. It's way better than you think. You'll see. And then Andre just X-ed the Swiss, and it's just like, oh, okay, I guess you're right. Don't call it Gruul, because Gruul's not here yet. So I think overall, super healthy. I think people enjoyed it. Attendance was high for all of these standard events. It's got to be a success, right?
All right. Glenn, how did you feel about this standard format on its way out?
I actually liked it a pretty reasonable amount. It took people a little while to actually figure out what was good, or specifically what was best. At the outset, it was all Thragtusk this, Thragtusk that, and then Sphinx's Revelation kind of came from a little bit of obscurity to really dominate the field, obviously, for several weeks, maybe even months, but it certainly wasn't, oppressing or anything. Other decks did very well. The Black-Red Zombie deck everyone thought was too good for a while, shown to be just another very healthy member of the metagame. So, I mean, there were so many viable decks, and all of them had relatively glaring weaknesses that you could exploit. It was so cyclical. You could pretty much just play the cards you wanted to. I don't really know what else we want in a format, generally speaking. Obviously, we saw the same cards a lot, but that's like because those cards are good. The strategies employing them are pretty different, Like if you want to try and tell me that like we should consider Naya and Bant Control to be like similar decks because they play Thragtusks, I think you're just an idiot. Like that doesn't make any sense. Like
I hope you told them that like when they gave you that suggestion. It's like, oh, interesting. Well, I think you're just an idiot.
Like if you want to complain about seeing Thragtusk, like it's a good card. Like there are just a lot of good cards in the format. Or I should say there are several like very key good cards, and then not like a lot of other competitors for them. So those are just the cards we see. And I don't mind seeing them. I think watching how multiple decks decided to attack the Thragtusk problem was one of the more interesting aspects of the format as a whole, actually. Like whether you're going over the top, like chumping a couple times, actually just getting 2-for-1, like whatever your plan was, it was just kind of interesting to see how people did it. Thunder Mahalkite being like one of the more successful ones that I think wound up probably netting the most overhead as far as like, I'm better than Thragtusk.
Alrighty. Steven, what are your thoughts on this past standard?
I definitely liked this standard. I have been frustrated by the standard metagame for a very long time because I think that aggro decks should just be winning this format, and I think that people are not playing them and not playing them right. That's sort of been interesting to me to see though, like, and I guess this weekend the Hexproof deck showed up, but I think if people are playing red-black, Hexproof, and green-white, the number of these mid-range to control-ish decks that you can actually play just goes very, very low very quickly. And I think that that's what people should be doing in this format. And I think it would have been more fun for me to watch, so I guess that's why I'm a little bit bitter, and maybe more fun for me to play. Overall, though, it's been a great format, and all of the decks that have been played have been really interesting to watch. Perhaps with the exclusion of Drag Tusk getting passed over and over again. That got stale fairly quickly. But, you know, you sort of needed a Drag Tusk in this format, I think, in the end. So, I think we started at two Tusk, 2 Furious, and with like
Drag Tusk 2 Electric Boogaloo, I believe that occurred as well.
I think that this format is now like the Notebook or something. It's just like these people and they have all these pretty lands and they're telling all these stories.
Alright, you lost me a little bit, but I'm willing to support your right to make those.
I'm saying
Yeah, sure.
we've lost Nicolas Cage and we're on to like Julia Roberts.
Okay. That's very deep.
I'm with him.
I'm not with him at all. I
No.
was left at the last stop.
Cedric knows exactly
yeah,
what
I'm still with
saying.
Glenn. So
How do you guys not understand what I'm saying? Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants is like, I like that too.
okay.
I like that a lot.
I just wanted to say that I think the biggest single calling card of this past standard format was diversity. I think it was a format where you could almost literally do anything that you personally wanted to do as like a Magic player. Like if you wanted to just use green spells and attack people with predatory ooze, then like sure, you can do that. Like there's a way for you to do that thing. If you wanted to cast red cards and kill people with like Fluffums the Fireheart Wolf and then Brimstone volley them in the dome, like yeah, you could do that. If you just want to cast Drag Tusk over and over until your opponent like has an aneurysm and kills from his chair, yeah, alright, that's fine. Maybe you can Soulbond Nightshade Peddler to some stuff. Maybe you can like have some Lingering Souls. I don't know. Like you could almost literally pick what you wanted to do and then try and win games of Magic the Gathering with that thing in the standard format. And it seemed like there wasn't a significant difference, like in terms of win percentage, from that deck to all the other decks. So that was sort of interesting to me. Said, did you have a thing you wanted to?
Yeah, there was just one more thing, and I could be wrong about this, and if I am, you guys can correct me. But I think this is, at least as long as I've been playing competitive Magic, the first time where we've had this many like good cards in a format, just like a power level of like all the cards across the format. Because like I can just think about cards right now that just like aren't really seeing play. That like if they were put in a couple years ago, you would just be like, are you what the hell? It's just like like Bonfire of the Damned is like a card that's like not even really seeing play right now. It's just like that card is insanely powerful. Sublime Archangel is an insanely powerful card. Even like Hunt Master of the Fell, it's just like you can just look across like all the color combinations and just all the cards that are just like available in standard right now, and it's crazy to me how many powerful cards there are just in the format that you can choose from, and how just like some of them just like aren't even seeing play, and like you'd be made fun of if you were playing them. And, like Mizium Mortars is a versatile, like one of the most versatile movement spells we've seen in a really long time, and when that got released, Shapeman was going crazy over it, and it's just like a couple in the sideboard, whatever, moving on. And it's just crazy to me how good the cards are and how you just can't play them all. But I mean, obviously you can't play them all. But I've never seen this kind of format with this many good cards in it before.
I think, like retrospectively looking back at the format, I would give the prize for attempting to play them all to that Door deck with the Wolf Run in it.
Sure.
Like that was the closest I think we've come to trying to catch them all.
Yeah, it's just I can't like even like some of the lands that you could play in this format that like aren't even seeing play. Like I could just imagine I don't know, like maybe like during like the Mystic Teaching days or something, if Desolate Lighthouse was a card, how like that would have just spun the format on its head. People would have gone through lengths to like get that into their deck, and now it's just like you might play one maybe for the mirror, and that's it. Like
God, that
it's
would have
just
been
crazy.
so good with the Gaia's Blessing engine.
Yeah, just like I can just imagine how people would just stretch to make that card get in their deck because it's so good on paper. And I mean, it's good in practice too. It's just not the right time for that card, I guess.
All right. Anyone want to talk about the awesome cards that are sitting on the sidelines? While we
Like chronic flooding. Oh wait.
saw that one, did it?
You've been saving that one for a while, haven't you?
Who doesn't love a good chronic flooding?
Kenji Samura, possibly. That's my theory.
Do you like that there are so many powerful cards, Cedric? I don't think I like that.
I don't think I like it either, but it's so weird to assess. Like, do I like it? Do I not like it? Because I don't know. Like, right now we're in this format where you just play like these super powerful cards, and it seems like you just ignore synergy. I think is the word I use here, and you just put a bunch of powerful cards in your deck, no matter what deck you're building. Like, if you're playing mono red, you just play the best cards available. Synergy doesn't really matter. If you're playing black red, we call it black red zombies, but I mean, like, realistically, is it even like a zombie deck? Like, there's Gravecrawler, which would be the zombie interaction with the other zombies, and then like we have Hell Rider and Dross Messenger, and then Thundermaw Hellkite. So really, it's just like Black Red Machine Head, honestly. And then like the control decks are just all the best cards, and like Far Sinks and Sphinx's Revelation to hold it together. So I don't like the closest we got to like a synergistic deck was Humans, and that deck's not even like that good. So I don't. It just seems like it's just like there's no synergy. When I think of synergy, I think of the Lorwyn format with all the tribal decks, with Merfolk and fairies, and how the cards all worked really well together. And like now, it doesn't really seem like how that's how the decks are built anymore, which is strange. But for playing in a deck building aspect, so I don't really know what to think about that. Like, do you feel one way or the other?
I'm not sure exactly how I feel. I have some thoughts. Like when I think synergy, I think affinity, which is a lot less romantic than the Lorwyn lock constructed format.
I was considering, like, you hold up your Ravager and you hold up your Disciple of the Vault, and you're like, do you see it? Do you get it?
But I think I like the affinity a lot. I think there are two things that are great about having synergistic decks in the format. One is that you can have a deck which is very clearly the deck to beat, and it can't change that much, which is important. When you have Infinity and it's clearly the deck to beat, like, Affinity can't respond to the format shifting to beat it by suddenly playing, like, non-artifact cards. That just doesn't make any sense. But when the best deck in the format is, like, some Thragtusk 3-color deck, and the format shifts slightly, it's like, oh, well, there are, like, 700 other really good cards which are available to me, and I'll just adjust slightly. So, I don't know, it becomes a lot less about building a deck for clearly defined metagame and more about, like, just sort of being on the next level, and I'm not sure I like that. The other thing about synergy is that you have, occasionally in decks with powerful cards and weaker synergy, you'll have a synergistic deck which shows up out of nowhere and wins on a weekend. And we actually just saw that happen with the Hexproof deck. That's an example of a synergy happening in this format, which certainly there are very powerful cards in that deck too, but like I think you'd have to be crazy to think that that deck is built on extremely powerful cards and not like the fact that it's hexproof plus enchantments. And I think that that's really cool to see and really attractive from the perspective of a rogue deck designer. So as like a deck designer sort of slanted player, I don't think that I like having so many powerful cards just because it makes it harder to pinpoint the format, and then it also makes it harder to build something exciting and new for the format.
I can agree with that point. It does make it difficult to make things, even just to make things exciting and new, to make them actually seem exciting and new is also harder when so many of the cards are going to be shared so frequently. Like someone, for example, like that's all the changes we saw to the Naya deck. Like obviously a lot of those decks were really different. Some of them even had like as few as like 12 cards in common, maybe like maybe 16. Like that's a really low number actually, and a lot of the strategies were really different. But at the end of the day, you never really thought of it as a new deck. You know, it was just like Naya splashing this when that was actually like a fundamental change in the deck very often. So I can agree with it sort of robbing you of that feeling where the format changes and it actually looks like it changes.
Okay. Do we have anything further on the standard retrospective? Sensing no? Sensing we should move on?
Sensing correctly.
Let's move to the Star City San Diego Legacy, which was won by Tony Murata with 12 Post, using the mighty Cloud Post to cast crab monsters from the deep. In a top 8 of 2 Rug Delver, 1 12 Post, 1 Esper Stoneblade, 1 Reanimator, 1 Jund, 1 Dredge, 1 Blue-White Helm. So we're going to do the Legacy Grab Bag section because that's my favorite way to do Legacy. Cedric, grab a thing, go.
I wish we had like clown music playing in the background. All right, 12 posts.
I really want a kazoo for the Legacy Grab Bag section.
Yeah, I wish we had yakety sax in the background for this part. 12 post is, it's whatever, right? Like it's this deck that I know it. Look, I know it beat Rug in the finals. That's not a normal thing. Okay, I'm just gonna tell you that right now. This deck should almost never beat Rug ever. Just on what those two decks are trying to accomplish. This deck has to start 3 Pithing Needles and board the 4th one just to beat Wasteland. And Rug is a deck that can... okay? Which Tony Murata openly admitted in his winner's interview. Ruben's talking to him, and he's just
That's
like,
good.
He's like, how's your matchup against Rug? He's like, pretty bad. I have to start with Needles just to be able to beat Wasteland, and I have to get lucky to draw them, and I have to get lucky that my opponent doesn't draw Wasteland, which is what happened in the finals. But and in game 2 of the finals, which was great, is he led off with Tropical Island instead of Cloud Post, and then his opponent Wastelanded it, and he crop rotated to get a Cloud Post, and then played Cloud Post next turn, and dead. The game was just over after that.
Don't you get like deck lists? Like
Yes.
So he knew that he was running Cloud Posts. I just want to check.
Yeah, he knew that he was running Cloud Post. He also knew that he was playing crop rotation.
Yeah.
He knew these things.
Get it.
Yeah, and he's just get it. And the
Cut off your green and your blue. How's that taste?
Yeah, and then Tony's just like, all right, crop rotate, get a post, play a post. So are we done, or how's this work? So like, I don't want people to be like misguided in thinking that this deck beats Rug because it should almost never beat Rug. I understand he won the tournament, what have you. This deck is very, very good at destroying the Tundra decks. Blue-White Miracles, Counterbalance decks, whatever. I think you can just infer that from all the mana that it can make, the fact that those decks don't play Wasteland, and the fact that Counterbalance cannot reveal a 6 for Primeval Titan or a 15 for Emrakul or whatever you need for appropriate Eldrazi. So in that regard, it has very good matchups against those particular decks. I think it is pretty soft Wasteland decks, but what's kind of interesting here is that Rug is its ultimately bad matchup, and I'm wondering how this deck plays against Bug and Jund. Because I feel like, those decks aren't really, Wasteland decks in the fact that they can't find their Wastelands like Rug can with Brainstorm and Ponder and Shuffling and all this nonsense. And they also don't put on a clock on you like Rug does while it's doing these disruption effects. Rug is the ultimate bad matchup because it's attacking your lands, it's stifling your things, and it's also presenting a clock with Mongoose and Delver. Whereas Jund and Bug don't really do that. They're trying to grind you out with like these discard effects and Deathrite Shaman dealing 2 on occasion, all this nonsense. So if this deck actually matches up it doesn't even have to be favorable, at least close with those decks, then I think this is a reasonable place to be, and you just want to dodge Rug, which Tony actually just played against Rug twice in San Diego, lost the first time because, believe it or not, he got Wastelanded, and then in the finals, he just didn't get Wastelanded and won. So I think this deck is, we've seen this deck before a little bit. Before I started doing coverage for SAG Live, his name escaped me again. Some guy, Andrew Steckley in Indianapolis, is a player who plays this deck quite a bit, and he likes it. He thinks it's fun. He's actually really good at Magic, too. He just doesn't play that much. This deck is fine. It's not going to change the format. People are still going to play Jund. People are going to still play Rug because it's Legacy, and people don't change their decks. That's what's so great about Legacy. And Tony Murata even said in his winner's interview, I've been playing this deck for like a year, and I love it. And I got good I got good matchups this weekend, and that's why I won. So the cool thing here, really quickly, is that it made coverage a fucking blast to do, because we just kept tuning in, and he's just like, yeah, cast Kozilek. It's like, what format are we playing again? And every time we got Ivugan, the opponent had to read the card and then go, okay. I think I'm not going to win anymore. And then he activated it and killed them. So it was a blast to cover. I was really happy about that.
Alrighty, Glenn, select your legacy object.
Yeah. Oh, that deck. I would never be caught dead playing that deck for the record.
Yeah, obviously.
Oh man. I don't know. I mean, it was a pretty interesting event all around, I would say. Jason Bolkowski top 8'd, and he's Joe Lissette's playtesting partner, for those not in the know. And they have a habit, actually, of alternating their top 8s. One of them top 8s one tournament, and the other one top 8s the other. And it is, not purposeful so much. Obviously, they'd really like to top 8 both, and they do that every now and again. But this time they switched with Joe going to standard. Jason plays Dredge a lot. It's not really a shock to see him doing well in a West Coast Legacy tournament with Dredge. So I was happy to see that. And beyond that, it just looked like a pretty standard tournament. Obviously, like the comedy of Rug getting crushed by 12 post is pretty good stuff, I guess. But nothing too exceptional beyond that.
All right, I appreciate that. I appreciate you picking players instead of decks. It's a very unique legacy approach. Steven, pick a legacy thing.
So I feel like sort of an idiot, because here's the deal: we've been doing this show for like almost a year now, in some aspect. I think Adam and I started in March doing some sort of weekly recap thing, and Gamestate as an official sort of thing that we do now has only been going on for 5 or 6 months. But so I never played Legacy much before then. I played it a little bit, but I've been following Legacy very thoroughly every week since then. And I have just never seen anyone play Reanimator in Legacy, ever, in a year. But I feel like I'm a complete idiot. I feel like that's something people do in Legacy, and you guys are looking at it and you're like, oh yeah, Reanimator, of course. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, because I don't know. Is this a Legacy deck?
Yeah, it was like a big thing. Remember when Gristlebrand came out and people were like, he's ruining the
This
format?
deck doesn't have Gristlebrand in it, Adam.
Okay, but there were a lot of Reanimator
you're talking
decks.
about this Reanimator deck.
I actually played against this deck on Moto for a 4-0 last week. Playing Sam Black's deck. Or no, playing Enchantress. It was actually Enchantress on the 7th. And I had no idea what was going on. I just got turn 2 Dark Depths in game 1 after accidentally mulliganing my Seal of Removal Elephant Grass hand. I was like, whoops. Literally just clicked the yes when I went for the no and died in game 1, and then just won the next 2 pretty easily.
This is a Reanimator deck, man.
Yeah, this deck is weird. I didn't know what was going on or why.
And you guys just assumed it had Gristlebrand's in it.
I thought it was the other Reanimator deck. I was not expecting this particular Reanimator deck.
Is this I don't know if this deck is good or not, because I've never seen anyone play these cards in Legacy.
I don't know. I feel like it can't be good. It's like a Reanimator deck that's not that great against swords, right? That's super awkward.
Well, Pat and I talked about this when we actually covered this match. We covered a match of his. Actually, Ruben and I were in the booth covering it. Pat was on break, and then Pat and I talked about it when he came back. If people are actually going to be moving away from Tundra, which is what Abrupt Decay and Deathrite Shaman have kind of forced people to do with Bug and Rug and Jund, if you're able to push the Tundra decks out of the format, then they have Abrupt Decay to take care of Dark Depths, and about that, that's not good. So if you're actually able to push swords out of the format, and it looks like it's kind of leaning that way, at least a little bit. I know VD won the Grand Prix with the deck, but people who normally play the Swords of Plowshare decks, Tom Martell, other people who like to play Stoneblade and stuff like that, were just I can't possibly play that deck now. Can't beat Bug, can't beat fucking Abrupt Decay. If you're able to push it out enough, then I think the combo of Hexmage plus Dark Depths is good. I don't think this list is where you want to be. I mean, there's two Marami in the deck, for God's sake. Like that, I refuse to believe that that's correct.
Yeah,
Even though
But a demon
the
token.
guy played that against me on Moto too. I didn't know what it was for. I was just confused. Like, this is Legacy, right? 5 mana, 5/5. Even if it's a land, not good enough, right? I'm just checking.
I know that
Cards saw
Glenn,
a little bit of play in standard.
Glenn, I know that you were playing in your WoW tournament this weekend, but the match that Ruben and I actually covered, the guy was playing against Stacks, or he's playing against Mud. Excuse me. The guy's playing against Mud, and he goes like turn 1 Tomb of Urami, go. Have to like player has to read it. We bring it off on the screen, everything.
Of course.
And I'm just like, I haven't seen this card in actual forever, and it wasn't even playable when it was a card then. And
It
then
was playable.
There were like one-ofs in standard decks.
borderline play.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
won
okay.
matches.
And then the guy just goes turn 1 chalice. The Mud guy goes turn 1 Chalice to the Void, and it like shuts off this guy's entire hand. And then like he finally draws a second land, and then draws 2 Lotus Petals, and it's just like, yep, moving in. Tomb of Urami, let's do it. Like, makes the token, and then the guy playing Mud just drew nothing. He had 2 Metalworkers in play, and he's just like, attack for 2. And the guy with 2 was like, attack for 5. And then
This makes me so sad.
yeah, and then by the time the guy finally drew something big to go off with his Mud deck, which was, you guessed it, Sundering Titan against the mono black deck, he was just like, I guess I'll cast this and die. So, you know, I don't know if the Reanimator guy, Ross Romer, was running well for the weekend. I don't know if his deck is good. I don't know.
I do. I can see where you're coming from with the swords thing. Like, the Hexmage plan is obviously good against Bug, and then the Reanimator plan is good against Rug. So you kind of get to dodge the Stifles and the swords against those decks. But I don't know. At a minimum, I would really want a Sphinx of Steel win somewhere. I feel like I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm stretching and saying that, like, this could be a thing. Like, the words are coming out of my mouth, and I don't even theoretically even really believe them. Like, I understand that Hexmage plus Dark Depths is good against, like, a certain thing. And if that certain thing starts to pick up, like, in a ridiculous amount, then I suppose this is where you want to be. But, I mean, does this deck actually have to have this, like, minor reanimation package? Is spoils necessary? Like, the Legacy card pool is so big, do you have to play this? You know, Beseech the Queen, we can't find a better tutor. Like, I don't know if this is what you're supposed to be doing or not, but I think there's a little bit of underlying strategy.
I mean, I've seen the Hexmage Dark Depths combo in a mono black shell with the Helm Leyline combo as well. Like, that used to be a thing. You were just a mono black deck with 2 like different combos to try and get them. But I
He can
haven't.
board into that.
Yeah, I hadn't seen like the Hexmage deck with a Reanimator sideshow, or like a Reanimator sideshow with a Hexmage, or a Reanimator main deck with a Hexmage sideshow, or whichever way it goes.
You
Also,
got some Hexmage and Reanimator.
yeah, I also really enjoy that Spoils of the Vault is in his deck, because I really enjoy people killing themselves with that card. Like,
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's just quite enjoyable.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I'd like to point out that probably no one else in this tournament could have run good enough to kill someone with Tomb of Urami. Like, some people make their own luck, Cedric.
You know, you are right about that, my friend. I can't argue. Heck of a deck.
All right, that was good. It was a good Legacy grab bag. Good work, everyone. We'll still keep looking for a Kazoo. Let us talk a little bit about Gatecrash spoilers before we close the showdown. There have been about 40-ish cards spoiled since our last show, give or take, including a number of charms, one artifact which impacts a deck we saw do well this week, and a whole bunch of big shiny rares. I've put the spoiler link in chat. I will let you guys each choose your own things and talk about it. Cedric, grab a thing, and let's talk some Gatecrash spoilers.
Okay, so let me ask you this really quickly. I know we did them last week too. Like, what was the most recent thing last week we talked about? Anyone remember? Did we have Boros Charm yet or no?
No, Boros Charm was not spoiled when we talked about it last week.
I think we like stopped at like getting the Champion of Justice and can't figure out if it's good or not.
We just did like some mechanics and the Planeswalkers, basically. That's what we did last week, I believe.
Okay. Alright, pick a thing.
Oh yeah, and we did Gate Shade, sorry. We talked about
that.
that.
Oh yeah! That thing's still scary. That guy's awesome. Alright, let's see here. So, looking at this, I guess the card that really just this really took me back when it was spoiled the most out of all the cards I've seen was Aurelius Fury. That was the one that like
Yes.
really just hit me like hard in the face as like this is a real thing, like that they can actually print and it's just perfectly fine because like wow, just rolling
Yeah.
thunder on top of like blinding beam ish on top of silence, and it's super versatile on how you can use it. And I mean, the first thing that I just thought of with this deck is like, you know, I know that Jerry and Todd love blue, white, red flash, and you know, I'm not saying that you're going to play 4 copies of this card. That's a bit ridiculous, but there will be probably 1 or 2 copies in there, and it seems like it's going to be a blowout every time. And God forbid I ever have to play against this card and playing a limited game of Magic,
Oh yes.
because I'm just not going to be happy every time this is cast against me. And I hope I actually am the one casting it. I don't know. I mean, I feel like, you know, if you have been away from Magic for a little while, you know, you just haven't played for a little while for whatever reason, and then you come back and your friend's like, dude, look at this card, open this booster, and then they read it and they're just like, what? Like what? They can make this, and and we can sit here and question on how good this card is actually going to be. Like that just like blows my mind in terms of Magic, of just like where we are and what can happen, and it's just crazy. Andrew Shrout says this card makes Bant Naya Casserole a real deck. I like that you call your
Is that
deck
the official name of the Shroud deck?
That's good. That's really good. Yeah, this card is just absurd to me, and it'll probably be good. I feel like this card has to be good somewhere constructed. I feel like it's impossible for it not to, just for all of the ridiculous things that it does. Even just like using it as a makeshift silence in the last turn to make sure you don't lose, like just something like that. I feel like it has to be a good card. Yeah, that's just my thing for right now. That's just crazy card.
All right. I just want to say that my first thought when I saw that card was that that card is the result of when you ask the question, if we printed Blaze as a mythic rare, what would it do?
Yeah,
And that, it turns out, is what it does. It just does like 3 cards worth of things. And you're like,
Boom.
alright.
yeah.
Okay. Glenn, take us through your spoilers. What do you want?
I think it's kind of funny actually. The Aurelius Fury, you mentioned it going like into the blue white red deck. I actually feel like that card might just put the blue white red deck into extinction. Like it's so good against that deck coming out of like the Naya decks. It's just
Okay.
like really savage to be able to like shut them off of their spells or like remove a Restoration Angel in combat. Stuff like that is like so sick. But I'm a simple country sorcerer. I like the less flashy spells. So the charms have intrigued me. You know, Simic Charm and Boros Charm are cards I know that I'll enjoy playing with, or at least thinking about playing with, even if Simic Charm winds up not being quite good enough. I think Boros Charm's got what it takes to make it for sure. That card's just right at a really nice power level. By the same token, I'm kind of intrigued with similar little tricky cards like Pit Fight, which is just instant speed, like make your guy fight their guy, which I like instant speed ways to deal with a Restoration Angel. One of my most frustrating Magic pet peeves in Standard is when I don't know whether I should attack or not because I always want to attack. So playing cards that help me make my decisions easier because I just have it, very soothing, very very soothing spells.
Alright, Steven, do you have any thoughts about the Gatecraft spoilers?
I haven't been super excited by any of the cards spoiled since we last talked. What I have had happen, or I've had 2 realizations about this format. And one is that Gideon's going to be totally fine. God damn it. And the other one is that I'm much more excited about this set than I was for Return to Ravnica. Just like, the flashy cards are not flashy in quite the same obnoxious way as the ones in Return to Ravnica were. I feel like the mechanics in all of the guilds are interesting. I'm still excited about Evolve. I think like daily about my sweet Evolve deck and how I'm gonna crush all of the noobs. And like I'm probably not, but I'm still very excited about Evolve. I'm somewhat excited about Extort, which is because I have some sickness and I played Thief of Hope and Constructed for a very long time.
Oh yeah, that's true. You did, right?
Yes. I don't know. I like this format a lot, and like I guess the thing that's made me happiest is that none of the cards that have been spoiled have made me like really go wow. Nothing has upset this like glorious balance that I'm seeing evolve out of the different guilds and everything that's going on. Uh, I undervalue Blazes in Limited and Constructed more than most, I think. I would not be surprised if that card ends up absolutely crushing my dreams and making me very sad. Other than that, I think all the cards have been completely reasonable and it looks like a really good set.
Alright, can we talk about that silly artifact, like the spotlight, and how it applies to hexproof cards?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
What is this card called? I know it's a picture of like
Glaring spotlight.
yeah. Well, I know that it calls to mind for me a child burning ants. So let me find the link. I will put it in the chat, and then we will.
I
talk
think that's probably just a very apt metaphor for the card. Like, way too much effort for entirely too little payoff.
Yes. Yes. That is exactly the same way I feel about that card.
Alright, so we got this card. It takes hexproof off their business, and it also like makes fries or something. Like you pay 3 mana and sacrifice it, and something goofy happens. You can make Pants Monster look really silly. You can slay all of the boggles. How do you feel about this card, and how do you feel about the mechanic of hexproof in general? Cedric.
How much time we have?
15 minutes.
Wow. I don't. This card. Just when I look at this card, it's just like. I feel like it's just their way of saying, okay, we may. This is like them acknowledging a mistake, maybe, but like not really, which is weird. Because like that's how it feels to me. Because it's like Forsyth released this on his Twitter, and it's like, yep, you tired of losing the hexproof? Got the thing for you. Here it is. And it's like, boy, that's timely.
Is this not just like the ugliest designed card you've ever seen in your life?
Yeah, like that's timely. Like hexproof is this. It's very very delicate, and when I'm doing coverage with Patrick Sullivan, the nice thing about working with him is that he's a game designer and has been for multiple games, and is designing Soulforge right now over at Stoneblade Entertainment, all of this stuff. So he's very opinionated, and it doesn't hurt that he's super smart too. And the one thing that I always took away from Pat when we talk about just design and stuff like that, because I don't know the first thing about design. I just play, and I'm a shark, and I try to be open-minded, is that the one thing he always says that stuck with me the most is that, you can print a fantastic set, and then if there is one mistake in it, then all the attention goes towards that one mistake, and it can ruin everything. And I feel like, that's what Invisible Stalker did for Innistrad. It's just this glaring mistake of a card that people are just like, I hate this so much. I can't stand it. I hope it's not good and constructed. And this weekend, it's just like, it had to be miserable for every person that lost that card to just be like, this is stupid. I can't stand this. How annoying this is. And, it sucks because hexproof is just this super delicate mechanic that you have to be very careful with because it's not interactive, or you have to interact in a very obscure way. And if you print it on something too aggressively costed, here's looking at you guys, the same draft, then it's going to be a bit of a problem. I don't actually hate hexproof. I think hexproof is fine. I think hexproof is actually really good when you print it on something big and splashy like Lone Revenant. Like, that card having hexproof, that's fine. Like, it even makes sense for it to have hexproof on a, flavor standpoint. Card's not too powerful, but, if you were losing the Lone Revenant, you wouldn't be like, this is dumb, I can't stand this. You would just be like, I'm losing to, a 5-mana spell. It's not that big of a deal. I got to play Magic. Whereas, with the hexproof cards that are aggressively costed or just cheap, like Invisible Stalker, it's like, cast this, enchanted, bye, have fun next round. That's not fun for anyone. So I think that you have to be super careful with how you design your hexproof cards, and I think if they were more careful in how they would design them, we wouldn't have to see just this card. It's aptly named. It's just, I just can't believe a card like this exists. And what was really funny to me is Forsyth brought up in one of his tweets was there's this staff from an old set that lets you block creatures that had land walk, and he's like, people weren't complaining about that card back in the day. And it's just like,
Well, there's an apt comparison. Thank you for
yeah,
that.
it's like that was like 12 years ago, and we didn't know as much as we know now and stuff like that. And I think like people would have complained about that. Like I think that's just like the worst comparison ever. It's just like, well, see, we fixed the problem, and it's just like, well, if we didn't have the problem to begin with, you would have to print something that is just abhorrent to read like this. I mean, it reads poorly, and the other thing, very quickly that like Svi brought up, he's just like, yeah, people aren't going to play this card. So I understand that you printed like a way to deal with hex. It's just not going to get played, and like if they want to deal with it, they'll just deal with it. Like I don't even feel like it's like a good solution to the problem. So I don't know. Like I don't hate hexproof. I certainly don't enjoy it, and you think the debates on the hexproof deck have been crazy. The debate on hexproof alone over the past 72 hours has been going nutso. So I'm willing to listen to either side.
Cedric Phillips, fair and balanced. Glenn, how do you feel about the horrible spotlight?
Yeah,
The
I found
shining
it kind of
spotlight.
funny. I found it kind of funny everyone got like pretty mad about the card because like I read it and I was just like, so this is just a commander card, right? Like everyone's confused and think it's supposed to like be plastered onto a constructed problem, but like it's not. It's not playable really. If it is, then I'll be a little horrified because it's like one of the weaker hate cards we've seen. But I think it's a totally reasonable commander card. That's just like the flavor I see on the card. It's kind of funny. I mean, obviously, the Glaring Spotlight is a funny name for it, especially considering the way the weekend went right before it was spoiled. But
Yeah.
I mean, its powers don't even really make sense together. Like that's the biggest thing that bugs me. Like if the card, like if it like cantripped or something, obviously that'd be good. If you could just sack it to draw a card, like I wouldn't hate it or anything like that. It'd probably be very playable. But like the decks that want to burn away or Doomblade hexproof guys are not usually the decks that also want to attack with their creatures, like en masse for lethal damage. Those are relatively separate interests most of the time because those decks can already just race in a lot of instances. So yeah, I mean I don't really have a problem with the card. I don't think it's going to see a lot of play in standard. If it does, I'll be surprised, but it's just a whatever card. Doesn't solve any big problem. I think that we'll be seeing hexproof like designed a little more carefully going forward. I think that in retrospect, Wizard's Wishes Invisible Stalker probably wasn't a thing, just because it never created a fun game of Magic in its life. But beyond that, whatever. It's just another card we got.
All right, Steven, the glaring spotlight is now on you.
It's right there. I've played enjoyable games of Magic with Invisible Stalker in them.
Can you swear for your opponent's enjoyment of those games? Like,
They were attacking me with Invisible Stalker, so they probably, like, I don't know, they didn't have to enter the tournament with that deck. I don't mind Hexproof as a mechanic at all. I think that talking about Hexproof as though it's non-interactive and stuff like that is like, I remember the first time I ever drafted Limited, I like drafted my red-green deck with 4 cast and cost creatures, and somebody cast a flyer and killed me. And I bet I was like, in like 13-year-old English, I was like, oh man, that guy's flying creatures were non-interactive. And it's just like, I think that talking about hexproof as though it's non-interactive it's not non-interactive. It's only on creatures for a start. Creatures are like probably the most interactive type of permanent. They have to attack you and get through your blockers. There are various things you can do to kill them, even if they're hexproof. Like you can cast a Rapid God, you can block them. Geist of St. Traft is one of the most interactive cards, I think, that's in the current standard format. Like you cast on turn 3 and suddenly there's a gigantic mini game around can you hit me with Geist. I think that like Doomblade, that's a fairly non-interactive card, and I don't think making it so that people can't just remove your creature with a 2 casting cost card means that you're taking interaction out of the game. I think that you're forcing interaction on the game. So I like Hexproof as a mechanic quite a lot, actually. And like, I think they've done a very good job of balancing it so that Invisible Stalker plus Runechiner's Pike doesn't just win the game. Like, it's a 1 power, 2 casting cost card. and it only has 1 toughness, so there are still ways you can accidentally kill it with various things, and you can wrath it, and it's just not that fast as far as racing. So I like Hexproof as a mechanic. This card is like, I'm not even sure if this is a card, so I don't have a huge opinion of it. I think it would be really funny if there were like a banned creature mirror where people just could not kill each other and regularly got to 20 creatures on board, and Gideon was like a 45-45, and then somebody played this and all of their creatures were unlockable. I think that would be very funny, but like realistically, I don't think this is going to see constructive play, so whatever.
Can we all agree that Slippery Boggle is like the true design mistake? Like that card shouldn't
No.
have been printed the 3 times that it was printed.
That was
Then what
printed
would go in
3
my one drop?
times.
It might have been only 2 times. I know it's an elf in a core set,
Yeah,
but
Glade
Slippery
Cover Scout.
Boggle is by far
Scout.
by far the most enjoyable name and by far the most enjoyable artwork for that card. So
I mean,
It
it's
is.
just an interesting situation all the way around, honestly. Just the entire thing. And, you know, the funny thing about this is just like, you know, the spotlight is supposed to be this, like this hate card. I hate when they, like, print hate cards that are intended for, like, a certain purpose and they don't work for their purpose. Like, I remember looking at Raking Canopy and, like, that was very clearly printed to beat fairies, and it's just like, yes, doesn't do a damn thing against them. It just doesn't do anything. And I feel like this card doesn't exactly do, you know, very much against like to solve the hexproof problems. I still think you have to interact in a different way than this particular card plus like our removal spell. I think you have to interact with pyroclasm effects or wrath effects or stuff like that to be able to beat this, which is fine. But I feel like, you know, if they're gonna print this card and be like, this is the thing that deals with the thing that people hate, and it's like, no, it's not.
and
This
then we'll
This
just
isn't the thing that does it
granulate.
at all. Yeah,
The
this isn't the thing
problem
that
is
does it at all.
solved.
Yeah, affinity granulate, kill all your stuff, except for I'm dying to an Atog. Like that's that's
Also,
a thing.
I'm already dead before I can cast this spell.
Yeah, that's also true. I guess I forgot about that. I hope you had your Wayfarer's bauble, because if not, you're dead. And if you do, hey, guess what? You're dead. So, you know, that was always nice. So that's all. I don't like. That's the only thing that really like makes me mad. It's like they print the cards to be like problem solvers. They're not even problem solvers, really. They had to like print so many problem solvers for fairies that like they finally just had to print like this glaring thing that just said that Great Sable said was like, "Hey, I'm here to beat fairies. Hey, here I am." So that part's frustrating.
It's no Savo's Decree. I would have enjoyed Savo's Decree. Like, can we have uncounterable Savo's Decree? Is that a thing we can have?
Yeah,
No? Oh.
probably not.
Enjoy your fairies, friend. Alright. I think that's all the time we have for today, unless anyone else has any super exciting Gatecrash spoilers. I know there's like Orzhov Charm we didn't mention specifically. What other things have been spoiled? That's
I feel like
super exciting.
we'll go deep in next week, because I think the entire spoiler will be out on Monday of next week.
Alright, let's do some shoutouts and get out of Dodge. Cedric, shout out to the people.
All right, party people, thanks for watching as usual. We appreciate it. Good show today. I was really happy with it. Let's see. I'm going to be in Dallas this weekend doing coverage. I'll be having Glenn Jones with me. Always a pleasure. And Glenn and I are going to have the unenviable task of keeping OSIP in check for most of the weekend. So if you are at home this weekend and you're looking for some fun coverage to watch, it'll be myself, OSIP, and Glenn in Dallas. Should be a blast. OSIP can say and do anything. I'm also going to be streaming tomorrow. Probably Jund. I don't even know if anyone gives a shit about that. You know, Jund is boring. But you know, if you're trying to win a modern PTQ or something, I can't win with anything else. So I'm just going to go back to playing Jund all day, every day. So hey, come watch that as well. But that's it for me.
All right, Glenn, do you have anything to say to the wonderful people?
If Cedric wasn't going to just steal my thunder, yeah, I am going to be in Dallas, man. Ruin the surprise. Hopefully next week I'll be back to streaming. What with me being at home in my own chair with my own computer and everything, you'll also be able to see me in video form for the same very reasons. I don't have much beyond that. I'll be playing in the Mox prelims, as I have qualified at least one account at this point, and I'm looking forward to it because I would like some sweet Force of Wills, and I have decks in all the formats that I like now, except for Standard, where I just keep getting lit up by ash zealots and wanting to kill myself on a regular basis. So
But no worries,
that's how
Ash
it
Zealot
goes.
is there for you. Like, you do not have to kill yourself. Ash Zealot will give
If
you
I
the
had
assist.
ash zealots, I would probably be playing them at this point. It's just so annoying.
Alright, Steven.
Yeah, I want to thank everyone for tuning in at the unusual time. Thanks for bearing with us through travel difficulties and snow. I don't know. I enjoyed the show. I'm excited for the pre-release in a week and a half. And I'm excited for the new standard format. Quite excited, actually. So I'm looking forward to the next couple of weeks on Gamestate. And I will see you guys there for them.
Alright, thank you for watching, everyone. We will see you next week. And hopefully we will be better about promoting when our show actually is. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Hopefully,
See you later.